Today's guest has more than 24 years' experience in improving business infrastructure. She's the author of the book Behind the Facade, and over the past 17 years has impacted more than 1 million lives. Today, she's going to share with you new ideas, insights, and information to streamline your business. Would you please help us welcome to the live stream our good friend, Alicia Pierce. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. Now, you've got a lot of experience here streamlining businesses, and you've been in the field for more than 24 years. What was the goal or dream that you started with, and what excited you about that?
Oh, wow. That is a very interesting question, because you know how we always start off with these grand plans and then life happens and you get introduced to new things. My background, Daniel, is actually in chemical engineering. So I was working in different chemical plants and oil refineries. If you had told me all those years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing today, I would have thought you were insane. So that's what I started off. I had a passion for process. And a lot of people don't realize this, but chemical engineers, we typically work as what's known as design engineers, where we're actually designing the equipment to manufacture certain products, or we're working as process engineers. And that's where my process skill set really comes from, are my days working as a chemical engineer.
Well, I'm glad you say you had a passion for process, because myself, and I speak for many business operators, we hear the word processes, and I'd say we're more dispassionate, and we start to shiver and shake. Oh no, not another process, not another spreadsheet. So your mind must be working very differently to other people's, because it takes a lot of foresight and thought and thinking, different thinking skills to achieve that. During that time, learning business process and being a chemical engineer, what were some of the challenges that you faced in your career or even in some of your projects?
Well, when I worked as an engineer, I can tell you a huge gap or a disconnect for me, Daniel, was not understanding the business behind the business, if that makes any sense. So my very first job, professional job, was at Monsanto. And I always tell people, don't judge me. Disclaimer, don't judge me.
My father was a farmer, and I heard about those Monsanto people.
I know you did. I know you did. But just keep in mind, I was very, very young. I was, 22, 23 years old. But what I realized was that there were certain decisions being made behind the scenes that I just wasn't privy to. I was just a little peon, on the ground level, just being a worker bee, right? And so what was happening, Daniel, one day we may be told to operate at full capacity. The very next day we may be told, oh, we're only going to run at half capacity. And then the day after that, we may be told to shut down completely. And then we run full throttle the day after that. So it just seemed to be very erratic. I didn't understand the law of supply and demand. I didn't understand the business decisions that were driving these daily production schedules. And so that was one of the first challenges I would have to say that I encountered in my career as a process person, so to speak. And so that's what drove me to go back to business school and just to learn the fundamentals of business, accounting and marketing and sales and finance and operations, the business side of operations. So that was one of the first challenges, for sure.
Interesting you say that, because a lot of people who start a business, they think they can just turn the tap on and turn it on straight to 7 figures and have no systems and process in there. And once it's open to 7, they're going to open the faucet and they're going to crank it up to 8 and 9. And I had a rude awakening when I started my coaching business, because I was helping salespeople double their sales, and it was possible. And then I started to speak to the business owners, and they said, hey, we know it's possible. We just don't have the systems in place to handle it. And I worked with one salesman, and his target was about $250,000 for the year. And he bought in about $750,000 worth of business in the quarter. And the team just imploded in upon itself. And all the business that he bought in they end up losing because they couldn't handle it. The customer complaints went through the roof, and it was back to that systems, process, and infrastructure. The business wasn't prepared for that new demand that was coming in, and it actually was more costly to them. So I've seen that out in the field as well.
You said that so eloquently, because we always talk about what happens when you don't have enough business, right? Obviously, your business will fail. But a business can also fail, Daniel, for the exact reasons that you just stated. What if you have more business than you can actually handle? So going back to that law of supply and demand, if your demand is up here, but your ability to supply that demand is down here, obviously that's a problem. And unfortunately, and this is why I'm so grateful to you for allowing me to come onto your platform and have this discussion, there's so much talk on the sales and marketing side, and obviously it's very important. People have to know that your business exists. There's no question about that. But the other side of the equation that's not spoken about as often are those systems, the operational side, what's going on behind the scenes, those back office operations, the things that your customers may not see, but they definitely experience, right? So those are the conversations that we don't have enough of. And this is why I think so many business owners and entrepreneurs, there's a serious deficit in that part of their businesses. And if they do have the benefit of being on your show, and then all of a sudden they have that viral moment and they have all of this traffic coming to their website, to your point, Daniel, can they actually handle that surge in demand? If you don't have those operational systems in place, yes, your business can in fact implode. And it's not about scaring anyone. It's just to make you aware, because once you're aware, you can actually do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like emotional intelligence. First step, self-awareness. Second step, self-regulation.
Absolutely.
For the people who are thinking, is this conversation right for me? We've got a couple of different stages of the business. So the first phase is the learning phase. And when we're in the learning phase, we're rapidly learning about the business. We're learning about the internals, the externals, the marketplace. But during the learning phase, there's often not a lot of sales coming into the business. But as you start to get into that growth phase, the leads are coming in, the conversions are taking place, and now we've got to sell. But after the selling, we've got to deliver. And I believe that selling is very easy. You can make a promise. You can make a big promise. You can use fancy words and people are going to believe you. But now you've got to be able to deliver on that promise. And that's where the rubber hits the road. So if your business is in a growth phase and it's starting to grow and you're a single business operator and now you've got to employ, now you've got to teach your systems to somebody else. But I think silently, a lot of business people, they've been so busy trying to get the business to grow that they haven't put systems in place. And they know secretly inside themselves, there's nothing for me to teach. All this intellectual property is in here and it works for me, but how do I teach it to somebody else? So if that sounds like you, then this is going to be a great conversation, because the business growth is often capped by the founder. And we call this the founder's trap in the business. The business operator can do it all. The business owner can do it all. But if you can't get other people to duplicate and replicate what you do, your business can't grow to that next level. So Alicia, once these businesses get into this growth phase and it starts to become chaotic, what are some of the problems that you're helping them solve in that growth phase?
One is high turnover, high attrition. Because things are so chaotic, because all of the knowledge resides in people's heads and not on that proverbial piece of paper, no one knows what to do. There's inconsistency in the way products and goods are delivered. So high turnover is definitely one. An increase in angry customers, what you were talking about just a few minutes ago, Daniel. That's also a telltale sign of fast, unmanageable, chaotic growth. For those businesses that are heavily regulated, where they have to pass audits, oftentimes they start to fail those audits because, again, they're all running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And they're just trying to keep their heads just above water to be able to keep things going, or well, they think they have things going, but in fact they don't. And it takes an audit to really reveal where those weaknesses exist. So those are some of the more immediate telltale signs that a company is in trouble. Because again, the revenue is coming in, the sales are coming in. That's not their issue. Their issue is being able to deliver on the promise, and that's what the operational piece is all about.
So for my 100x DNA students, this is a good opportunity for you to reflect on your disc styles. Because when you're growing a business, the D style person who's got a lot of energy here in the D style, they're going to put a lot of energy into getting results, and they'll chase, and they're good hunters. They're very good hunters, but they're poor farmers, and they fail to put these systems into place. If you're a high I style on your disc, what you'll do is, rather than putting energy into systems, you'll put your energy into influencing people. And what can happen is you can generate a lot of sales because of your personality, but once they come into the business, it's hard to manage it because there's no system in place. Now, for the high S and the high C, naturally, you really enjoy systems and processes. So that's for the high S, and you'll appreciate it. But one thing that you've got to avoid in starting a small business or an entrepreneurial business is having too many systems, too many complex systems. So you've got to be careful of that. You've got to make sure your systems are practical and are suitable for the stage of growth you're at. Your 5-figure growth systems are going to be different to your 6 and to your 7 and to your 8 figure. So you've got to be mindful here. But also for this C style, one of the problems the C style has when they're putting systems into place, Alicia, everything's got to be perfect. If it's not 110% perfect, I'm not going to do it because I'm so afraid of making mistakes. So what we can learn here is that if it's working for somebody else, if the wheel's been already invented, we don't have to reinvent it. We just have to learn how to make it fit into our business. So knowing that these people have different problems based on their personalities, for these drivers, you were saying before you're a high D style and a high C, how do these systems benefit you in your business?
Well, I just have to say I'm enjoying listening to you break it down, the disc style. So can you imagine for a person like me that there's always that inner conflict because I'm high D and high C. And you know what personally helped me, and I hope you don't mind me just kind of interjecting this really quickly. I developed a personal mantra, Daniel, and that mantra is leave it better than you found it. Because you're right, because of that high C would start to rear its ugly head. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't stop. No, I have to keep going. It needs to be perfect. But I had to accept, is it at least better than the state that I found it in? And that could apply to so many different types of things. So I just wanted to mention that in case there's anyone else who's listening to this or watching this right now who's thinking, oh my goodness, I'm also a high D and a high C. How do I reconcile those two conflicting personality traits, I guess you could say. But to your point about systems, I think you were asking about the types of systems that we have in my company. Is that what you were asking?
So for me and my disc style, I'm high D, high I, low S, low C. So I'm always going to chase the result. I'm going to go after the result at 100 mile an hour, and I'm going to enjoy the people contact along the way. But what I'll resist, because my S and C style is low, is I'll resist putting the systems in place. So I can bring in a ton of business, but once it's in, oh my gosh, who's going to take care of it? Because I don't want to get down in the details. And so I think that your system here is going to benefit so many of these disc styles because our community is very attuned to their disc styles and understanding how these systems and process start to make life easy for them.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be, I'm hoping that after our discussion that people will look at this in a completely different way, because I think when so many of us hear process, we're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to sit down and write everything step by step by step by step by step. And it can give you angst, especially if you're not that type of person, if you are more of a big picture visionary thinker and you don't want to be at the ground level, rolling up your sleeves, digging into the nitty gritty details, making sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. But I promise you, I'm going to show you some things before our conversation is over that you can take with you and get to those results, especially for the high D folks, get to those results even quicker.
And I like that. We've got to be mindful where we put our energy. And
That's right.
in disc, what we have is we have two styles. We have a natural and an adapted style. And for the high D like myself, if I have to try to invent something and put my energy into the details, I feel burned out really, really quickly. But if I can find something that's already established and I can be shown, Daniel, this solves that problem, and I can implement it and I don't have to go through all the details, it serves me so well. And I know with my business, it's grown because of systems. But whenever I went into a decline, I realized I didn't have a system. And so I could never duplicate or replicate what I was doing. So what do you see? People who start businesses and they fail to put systems into place, what would be the biggest risks and how does it impact their business when they fail to have the systems in place?
Well, so the clients that I work with are not startups. And the reason, Daniel, is because operations, systems, processes, business infrastructure, it's a really hard sell to a startup because they're all about the results. They're all about making the sale. So it's all about the branding and the marketing, the sales, the promotion, the publicity. But it's usually when they start to realize a return on the investment into those sales and marketing related activities, that's when they realize, oh my gosh, we have, again, more coming in than we can supply. The supply can't meet the demand. If we don't take a look at our back office operations, we can implode and lose everything that we've worked so hard to build. That's the point where I usually come in, because at that point, it's a very easy sale and it's a very natural conversation. Of course, it would be great if more people were proactive about these kinds of things. But again, it's just not something that most startups are looking at. So I don't want anyone beating themselves up thinking, oh my goodness, I've started this business and I don't have any of my systems in place. Don't beat yourself up, because even some of the more larger organizations, the really big enterprises, you would be amazed at how many of them don't have many of their processes documented. So one of the first things that, again, I notice is the high turnover. Or it could be, and I know this is something else that you really specialize in, Daniel, is matching team building. And then once you start to recruit people and add people to your team, are they sitting in the right seat? Do you have the right people doing the right things? That's also a really big issue as you're starting to not just grow, but really scale your output. That is one of the first things that we focus on. And then once we understand what work needs to be done, who ideally should be performing that work, that's when we can start having a natural conversation about how to organize the work and how to document it. So that as your team continues to grow, because things are documented, it's going to be that much easier for you to onboard additional people, train them, and make sure that the consistency of your product or your service remains intact and that it's never compromised, because that is a surefire way to lose your customers, is when they're used to having a certain type of experience and then all of a sudden that experience, for whatever reason, is compromised.
I see this a lot in businesses where there's somebody in a key role, but they're not the right person, and the business wants to de-hire them and let them go. But the business owners are afraid to let them go because all of the IP is inside of their head. And so they often keep this person in the position, although they're the wrong person, for too long because of that fear. And so they tend to avoid the de-hiring decision and they just keep them there. But ultimately that person then decides to go, and then they're left
so you've
wide
lost
open
information
and
anyway.
exposed, and the information's gone. And then they think to themselves, I should have extracted all of that before they went. So we've got to think about that. Even in one of our family businesses, we operated for 17 years. And after 17 years of business, the way the business ended was simply selling the stock at value and closing the shutter. And that was it. All the goodwill that had been created, all the database, all the customers, all the sales that were created, all of that meant nothing at the end of the 17 years. And the reason was there was no system. There was no process. There was a computer program, but it didn't show you how to do anything. So when the business closed, the IP was in my head, my brother's head, my mum's head, and my father's head. So there was nothing in process, so it couldn't be sold. And the other thing that we resisted as a family, and it was really from mum and dad, was they said, look, if we sold the business, we don't want to be stuck here as an employee. We don't want to be tied to the business for another year or another 2 years teaching other people what to do, but just getting an employee's wage. We don't want to be told what to do. We want to have our little lazy moments and get away with the things that we're allowed to do, but we don't want to be governed by someone else. So for them, 17 years of hard work ended with stock at value being sold and the shutters being closed. And that's painful, knowing what I now know is if there were systems and processes in place, they could have possibly had a continuing income well into their retirement, or they could have sold it and really topped up that bank account.
Wow.
So if your business, if that ethnograph is coming to the end of your business life cycle and you want to exit your business and you're thinking about exiting, then you've got to have your systems in place. You've got to have that IP documented, because
absolutely,
you've worked hard and you may as well make that last little bit of extra money before you leave, because you'll never get it back later on.
Well, talk about a cautionary tale. Wow, that's heartbreaking. That's really heartbreaking to hear. But it sounds like you've learned the lesson, and you're definitely an advocate, even though you admittedly may not enjoy doing it.
I don't enjoy it. I do not enjoy it.
But here's the thing, though, Daniel. You at least recognize the value.
Yes.
That's a big difference. There's a big difference between a person like you and a person who says, I don't get it. Why does it matter? I don't see the value. That is a very dangerous state to be in.
It is. And for me, Alicia, when we take our clients through our Hartman's value profiles, we're assessing their ability to make a good decision. And one of the key areas where my strength is in people. So my business is coaching and training people. I'm all about helping people. And that's where I put my energy. And I know, based on the science, based on the emotional intelligence, that when it comes to systems, I'm a maverick. I'm a rule breaker. Even if I put in a system, I'm going to break the rules and I'm going to do something different. And the key thing is I know I don't like systems and I know what I am going to do. But I also value a system where I don't have to implement it myself. So going back to my disc style, if I can get somebody to give me a model that works and I can utilize it and I can get more results because I'm that D style, if I can get more interactions with people because I'm that I style, I'm all for it, because somebody's done the heavy lifting and it's just another decision. Okay, if I make a decision on process, does it give me what I want and what energizes me, more results and more people contact? Yes, and I'll do it. And if I can get somebody else to push the buttons and pull the levers, all for it. But a lot of business owners, they don't get to that stage of understanding what they don't like about systems. They don't understand their preferences. So they get the shakes. Oh my gosh, another system. Oh, maybe we shouldn't grow. Maybe we should just stay self-employed. Maybe that's better. That's what my parents would say. Don't employ people. Why not? Well, they'll just take advantage of you. You got to train them. And if you train them, what if you train them and they leave? And I'd look at my mum and say, Mum, what if you train them what if you don't train them and then they stay? And she'd say, Isn't it time for a coffee? Let's have a coffee instead. Now, a lot of people, like I'm saying here in my example, they love people. They enjoy serving their customers, but they hate putting this process into place. Some of these very simple tools that you've got here, like stick figures, what are some of these simple tools that are available to help them overcome obstacles?
Can you see this?
There we go.
This is one of my stick figures. I told you we're gonna make this fun. We're gonna turn everyone who's watching this into a believer. So one of the things, I use index cards, Daniel, and stick figures. And let me explain how we use these two very simple, low-cost analog tools to deliver dramatic results, especially when it comes to building your business infrastructure. And you're going to love this because it's all about people. So one of the first questions that I want to challenge everyone who's watching this to ask yourself, what work needs to be performed? this is going to be the hard part. This is going to be the not so fun part, but I promise after this, it's going to get a lot better. And what I mean by that is literally write down every single task that you perform, no matter how complex or mundane, write it down. And even think of the things that you recognize you need to do, but you may not currently be doing. It's best if you do have a team, this is the time that you want to get everyone in the same room at the same time. I'm, working remotely is great, but I am also an advocate of being together face to face, the synergy that you have in the room. And once you start kind of feeding off of each other, it's going to generate some conversations about things that you didn't even know were going on in your own business. So definitely, if you can, get into the same room at the same time and start having this brainstorming session. Imagine having these very large Post-it notes and you're putting them along the wall. And as each person starts to tell what type of tasks they're working on, all of those things are being captured. And what's going to happen next, you can then start to transfer each of those tasks or activities onto index cards. So what I'm holding up here, this is just for illustrative purposes only, but I have here tasks C1, A1, and B3. So imagine you're in a room now with everyone who's on your team. You're surrounding a very large table, and you have all of these index cards spread out across this table. You could very easily have upwards of 300, if not more, different index cards. That's one of the first revelations, is you're going to be so amazed at just how much work, not just you, but everyone else is doing. So once you have all of that spread out before you on these index cards across this large table, the next thing you're going to do, Daniel, is actually group together tasks that are similar in nature. And so what I'm doing here, again, for illustrative purposes only, I've grouped here tasks A1, A2, and A3. Now, once you group these tasks into columns, and I do recommend not grouping into more than 9 columns, and the reason why is because I know you like science, you like things that are backed by science. So there's something called the rule of 7 plus or minus 2. And it's the idea,
NLP students will know this.
It's the idea that the average person, we can easily recall anywhere from 5 to 9 bits of information at a time. This is the reason why phone numbers for so long, at least here in the US, were just 7 digits before we were forced to start using our area codes, because people can very easily remember a 7-digit phone number. So the next thing you want to do is for each column that you have, that you've grouped together, similar tasks, you then want to put another index card on top of that. And you're going to ask yourself, based on the tasks that are represented in each of these columns, if I had to associate those tasks with a particular department, what would be the name of that department? And again, just for illustrative purposes, I have here Department A, but it could easily be your people department. It could be your operations department, production, design, marketing, IT, the list goes on and on. Once you've done all of that, just stick with me here. So imagine you now look at one department at a time. So again, we're going back to Department A, task A1. You then want to ask yourself, in a perfect ideal world, if you had access to all of the resources that you needed, who ideally should perform task A1? Now, it's going to be tempting because you might say, well, as the CEO, I do task A1, but it's not about what you're currently doing. It's should you be doing it? It's not about if you can do it, should you be doing it? And so it could be that really it should maybe be an office manager of some sort that should really be performing that particular task. What's going to happen, and people go through this exercise really quickly because it's so, because it's you're dealing with tangible tools. We're moving things around on a table, and people are so engaged, Daniel. I have seen grown adult men get so excited when they see these stick figures. And then we use a dry erase marker. So this is a product from my company. These are some laminated stick figures. And the beauty of it being laminated is that as you use a dry erase marker here, if you decide, well, that's really not the name of that ideal role, it really should be a bookkeeper, or it should be the director of operations, whatever the case may be, you can easily just erase it and put the name of the correct title. But the point is to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation with other people on your team about how that work should be properly allocated. So this goes back to what you specialize in, Daniel, which is, are the right people working on the right things? And if not, how do we redistribute or reallocate the workload so that we are truly matching skill sets to the different activities that have to be performed? And then from there, so once you know what work needs to be performed, how that work is organized into departments, and who ideally should perform all of those different tasks or activities, that, Daniel, is literally the foundation for how you create everything else with your business infrastructure. It's going to tell you how to create your company's organizational chart, how to organize your digital as well as your physical records that are associated with your business. It's going to also help you figure out which processes need to be documented. So you have all of these different tasks per department. How do you further group those different tasks into processes? And that's how you get in place your business infrastructure. I'm not going to kid you. It can take a long time, but I promise you it is so worth the effort, because once it's in place, it's just a matter then of maintaining it, updating it as you hire and expand your team, as you change technologies or you upgrade technologies, you move into a larger office space. Nothing about your business is static, so you can't expect your infrastructure to be static as well. But I hope this, in some small way, sheds light on how you can start to create a foundation upon which you can grow and scale in a sustainable, profitable, and repeatable way.
I agree, and I've seen it happen. A good friend of mine, he said to me once, he said, Daniel, my 100% is not as powerful as 1,000 people's 1%. Now, I should have known he was good with systems, but I really didn't understand what he said. So I said, what? What did you say? And he said, I can give 100% every day, but I can't give any more of that than that. That's it. I can only ever give 100%. But if I get 1,000 people who give 1% every single day, I get 1,000% every day. And he grew his business off that philosophy, where he had systems in place, and every system could be duplicated by somebody else. So all you had to do was to reteach the system to somebody else, and the business could grow. So you could bring in another 4 people, you could bring in another 8 people, you could bring in another 16, you could bring another 32 people in, and they could just produce consistent, predictable results. And he took the business from, I think, $1 million in sales to in excess of $100 million in sales. Wow. Just in a couple of years. And then when the business was exited and they sold it, was sold for about $220 million. But it was all because these systems that you're talking about were in place. And they're so important if you want to scale, because you get to that stage where you realize I can only give 100%. That's it.
That's it.
But if we get 1,000 people giving 1% every day, we won't say the next Monsanto, maybe bigger and better. Now, I want to learn more about your website, and for our clients who know they need systems in their business, where should they start on your website?
So this is a great place, what you've pulled up. So the way you get here is go to smoothoperator.courses. We are getting ready to launch a new, hot off the press online course where you will learn how to use these stick figures, these index cards. We're going to take you through creating your business infrastructure from beginning to end. So everything from identifying, again, the ideal people who should be doing things, creating those transparent job descriptions, creating your organizational charts, creating your electronic records or your digital records inventory. We're going to look at the proper way to lay out your workspace, as well as not only identifying the processes that you need to document, but how you actually document them, because that also doesn't have to be as painful and as tedious as many people might be thinking it has to be. There are certain technologies you can leverage where you can get your processes documented in little or no time. So yeah, this is the website. Please go here, sign up, and we would love to have you and become a part of this smooth operator community.
And make sure you press play on the video. I love the video.
Thank you.
So make sure you go to the Smooth Operator. You better give me the website again.
Sure. Smooth Operator. Courses.
Make sure you go there now. Make sure you press play on the video. It's a great video. I love it. I have website envy. I looked at this and I thought, I'm going to ring my team today and say,
wow,
we've lost the competition.
No, that means a lot coming from you. Are you kidding me? Your websites are amazing.
Well, as the high D, my wife and I, we're so competitive. We're so competitive. If there's a better website, we've lost. We've got to go again.
No, her website is gorgeous. I looked at your wife's website. The pictures, those are really nice with all of the flowers. And yeah, very nice.
So my wife demands that we have photos. And one of the values in our family is there's two values, education and fashion. So there's always a budget for education, unlimited budget for education. If you want to learn something, there's always a budget. If you want to get a coach, a consultant, a tutor, we're having private judo lessons tonight. So I said to my wife, some people really like group courses, and I go to some group courses, but I really like to just work with the expert one-to-one. That's my preference. And I said to my wife, I don't want to go to a judo class when I can have the instructor come and coach me personally. So tonight, another budget for education. We're getting a private judo instructor. So always a budget for education and always a budget for fashion. Coming back to the photos, my wife says, at least when we die, our children will be able to go back through social media and see all these amazing photos that we've taken over the years.
Yes, like Vogue, like the cover of Vogue magazine. That's what I thought when I saw her website. Seriously.
That's her number one goal.
Yeah.
To be too cute. That's her goal. and she does it.
Well, mission accomplished.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what I want you to do today is I want you to head over to Alicia's website. We'll put the link in the show notes below so you can just simply click that and do it now. And all businesses, including mine, they fail to grow when there's no systems in place. And we call that the founder's trap. And for many years, I was the founder of my business, and my business couldn't scale beyond me because everything was in my head. But as I started to put systems into place, I could bring in other people and they could start to follow the systems. And I'll give you an example. There's three things in my business. There's three things that I do as the business owner, and only three things. I speak, I sell, and I coach. They're the three most important key result areas for me. Nobody else can do the speaking for me. Nobody can do the live streams other than me. I can't outsource that to the Philippines. I can't outsource it to South America. I've got to do that. Secondly, I've also got to be able to sell. But selling in the past for me was one-to-one. But to be able to scale, I can't do one-to-one sales anymore. So what I do is I sell from the platform. And then I can have sales people and consultants close the back-end sale. But they have to be taught what I used to do. So we teach them what I did in the past, and they can replicate that same result, and they can get the exact same ratios. Speak to three people, make a sale, because you can duplicate it. And then the third thing for me is the ability to coach. But only I can coach what I know. But you can coach what you know. So we even have systems in place to teach people how to get the exact same results as me. And we have a system in place, Alicia, that's 45 years old now. It's worked for 45 years. My mentor gave it to me as a system and a process. He said, Daniel, follow this word for word and you'll get the exact same results as me. So I followed the words in the book. I followed his system in the right order and sequence, and I was able to achieve in the first year what took them 45 years to complete. And now when I pass on this exact same system and process to my students, they say, Daniel, we would love to do what you do. And I say, well, it's taken me a decade to learn it. This is how I've improved it based on what's important for me. And if you like how I do it, just do that. And they report back, not after a year, but after a session. They say, Daniel, I just read that, implemented that, got the same result. So if we want to grow, if we've got big goals to have a broader impact, then you must have a system in place. So I want you to learn more about what Alicia's doing. Sign up for the course, learn, and apply today.
Yes.
Alicia,
please.
for you, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our friends?
Well, again, I think maybe the most fitting thing to say is just to repeat my mantra, and that is, leave it better than you found it. Don't beat yourself up. Don't compare yourself to where you think other people are, because a lot of times when you look underneath that hood or you look behind the curtain, it's not what you're thinking it is. That's why I named my book Behind the Facade. But seriously, take these techniques that Daniel and I have shared with you today and just start. You don't look at the whole picture. Just look at the different slices of the pie. Don't look at the whole pie. Otherwise, you will get overwhelmed. But just get started. Do a little bit each week. Don't overwhelm yourself, and watch the results that you'll have another 12 months from now, and then come back and let us know.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, one new idea at the right time is enough to change your life. And once I applied systems in my life got better. I didn't lose time. I got more time back with my family. Instead of having to chase my tail all the time, I chased the kids around the park. It's much better for your health. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Alicia, wonderful. Thank you.